What if the greatest truths about life, the universe, and humanity were not hidden in the future, but buried in the past? What if civilizations long gone, cultures, erased by time, buried under sand, or swallowed by the sea, once carried knowledge so profound that it could transform how we live today? And what if, without even realizing it, we have been living in their shadow, repeating their wisdom in fragments while forgetting their source? History, as we're taught in classrooms, is a neat story. Civilizations rise, civilizations fall, and progress marches forward. But when you look closer, the story becomes far more mysterious. Across continents, cultures that never met shared the same symbols, the same myths, the same sacred numbers. They built monuments aligned with the stars. They developed calendars so precise that even today, scientists marvel at their accuracy. And they spoke in their myths and teachings of truths that modern science is only beginning to uncover. Take, for example, the Mayans of Central America. They are often remembered for their massive pyramids and their mysterious calendar, which sparked worldwide attention in 2012. But few know that their calendar wasn't just about marking days. It reflected cycles of time, cosmic rhythms that linked the movements of planets and stars with the fate of humanity. For the Mayans, time wasn't linear. It was alive, circular, flowing in patterns. They believed that by understanding these cycles, you could understand your place in the universe. Compare that with modern physics, where time is not absolute, but relative, shaped by gravity and speed. Could it be that the Mayans intuited a truth we are only now beginning to articulate? Or look at the Egyptians. Everyone knows the pyramids of Giza, standing like eternal guardians on the desert plain. But fewer realize how precisely they are aligned. The Great Pyramid is almost perfectly oriented to the cardinal directions, and its proportions encode mathematical constants like pi and the golden ratio. How could a culture thousands of years before modern instruments achieve such precision? Was it merely skill, or was it something deeper, a form of knowledge, now forgotten, about the harmony between Earth and cosmos? Some scholars suggest that the pyramids weren't only tombs, but spiritual machines designed to guide the soul through the afterlife. If true, then the Egyptians were not only engineers, but philosophers of existence itself, leaving behind teachings carved in stone. Travel further east, and you encounter the Vedic civilization of ancient India. Their scriptures, written thousands of years ago, describe the fabric of reality in ways eerily similar to quantum physics. The Rig Veda speaks of the universe arising from vibrations, a cosmic sound and idea echoed today in the concept of string theory. They spoke of Maya, the illusion of the physical world, and of consciousness as the ultimate reality. Modern scientists are still debating whether consciousness might indeed be fundamental, rather than an accident of matter. Could it be that these ancient texts were not mystical poetry, but fragments of a deeper understanding teachings we've forgotten in our pursuit of material progress? And then there are the megaliths. From Stonehenge in England to Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, from the statues of Easter Island to the Nazca lines in Peru. The ancient world is littered with monuments whose purpose we still cannot explain. Why did people drag stones weighing tons across miles of landscape, erecting structures aligned to solstices and equinoxes? Were these observatories, calendars, or temples? Or were they something more, a way of encoding knowledge about the cosmos into architecture, leaving behind messages that could survive the collapse of empires? It is easy to dismiss these mysteries as coincidence, or to say that ancient people simply had clever ways of solving problems. But when you step back, a pattern emerges. Across the globe, civilizations separated by oceans and time seem to have been reaching toward the same truths. The connection between human life and the cosmos, the cycles of time, the power of symbols and sound, the importance of harmony with nature. These are not random fragments. They are a chorus of forgotten teachings, echoing across history. But why were they forgotten? Why, if these civilizations carried wisdom so profound, do we not remember it clearly today? Some of it surely was lost to conquest and destruction. Libraries burned, temples fell, languages died. Some of it was hidden deliberately, guarded by priesthoods and initiates, never meant for common eyes. And some of it may have been buried not in stone, but in myth coded into stories of gods, heroes, and creation. Stories we now dismiss as superstition. Yet the question remains, what if we could recover this wisdom? What if we could piece together the teachings of lost civilizations, not as relics of the past, but as guides for the present? Could they offer us a way of seeing the world that is not fragmented but whole, not mechanical but alive? Could they remind us of who we are and what we are capable of becoming? The forgotten teachings of lost civilizations are not just about history. They are about possibility. They suggest that humanity has always had access to truths larger than ourselves, and that those truths are still waiting, hidden in stone, in myth, in the stars, waiting for us to listen. There is one name that has haunted historians, philosophers, and seekers of truth for millennia: Atlantis. First written about by the philosopher Plato, Atlantis was described as a great civilization, advanced in knowledge and power, vanished in a single day and night of catastrophe. To most academics, Atlantis is a mytho-cautionary tale about pride and downfall. But to others, it is a memory, faint but enduring, of a civilization that may have once existed. Why does the idea of Atlantis resonate so deeply? Perhaps because across the world there are echoes of the same story. A lost golden age, people who held great wisdom, a sudden destruction by flood or fire. In Mesopotamia, the Epic of Gilgamesh describes a great flood that wiped out humanity, sparing only those who were warned. In the Bible, Noah's Ark carries the same theme. In Hindu tradition, texts speak of cycles of destruction and rebirth, with great civilizations rising and falling like waves upon the ocean. Could all these stories be fragments of a shared memory, a time when human knowledge was far greater than we now imagine, but was swept away in catastrophe? If Atlantis did exist, what kind of wisdom might it have carried? Some suggest that it was a civilization deeply attuned to energies we no longer recognize, energies of the earth, the stars, and the human mind. Ancient legends describe crystals that held power, machines that could harness natural forces, temples built not only as places of worship, but as instruments of transformation. Whether literal or symbolic, the story of Atlantis reminds us of something profound. Knowledge once gained can be lost, and with it, humanity's sense of connection to the deeper mysteries of existence can fade. But Atlantis is not the only mystery. Across the world, ancient cultures seem to have shared teachings despite being oceans apart. The serpent, for example, appears everywhere. To the Egyptians, the serpent represented rebirth and protection. To the Mayans, the feathered serpent Quetzalcoatl was a bringer of knowledge and civilization. In India, serpents or nagas were guardians of wisdom, beings who lived between worlds. How could such a powerful symbol emerge independently across continents? Was it coincidence, or a sign of some deeper connection, perhaps even a shared origin? Another mystery lies in the pyramids. While the Egyptian pyramids are the most famous, they are not alone. Step pyramids rise in Mexico, Sudan, China, and Indonesia. Cultures that supposedly had no contact built strikingly similar structures, aligned with celestial events. Did humanity simply repeat the same architectural solutions? Or did these pyramids serve a universal purpose, anchors of knowledge built to preserve teachings through stone? Consider also the myth of the world tree, or Axis Mundi, a cosmic pillar connecting heaven and earth. It appears in Norse mythology as Yggdrasil, in Mayan tradition as the Ceiba tree, in Indian philosophy as the Ashvatha. Each describes the universe as a living tree, with roots in the underworld, branches in the heavens, and humanity dwelling in between. Such parallels hint at a worldview far more unified than the one we hold today. Ancient people did not see themselves as separate from the cosmos. They saw themselves as threads in a vast living web. Asterisk, and what about sound? Many ancient cultures spoke of the universe as being created by vibration. The Hindus spoke of Om, the primordial sound. The Mayans believed in the creative power of spoken words. In Egypt, the god Thoth was said to have spoken the world into being. Modern physics, in its search for the fundamental building blocks of reality, that considers that vibration strings of energy may indeed underlie the universe. Could it be that these teachings, long dismissed as myth, were echoes of truths that science is only now rediscovering? This raises a profound question. How much knowledge has been lost to time? When empires fell, when invaders burned libraries, when oral traditions vanished with their storytellers, how many teachings slipped into silence? The Library of Alexandria, once said to hold the wisdom of the ancient world, was destroyed. Mayan codices, containing centuries of astronomical and spiritual knowledge, were burned by conquistadors. Entire ways of seeing reality disappeared, leaving us with fragments. Yet fragments can still speak. Symbols, myths, and monuments remain, like puzzle pieces scattered across the earth. Together, they suggest that ancient civilizations were not primitive, but profoundly aware. They remind us that wisdom is not the same as technology. A people may not have had computers or airplanes, but they may have known things about the human soul, about nature, about the universe that we have forgotten, and perhaps the teachings of lost civilizations are not truly lost. They are hidden, waiting for us to listen. They survive in rituals, in folk stories, in symbols carved into temples. They survive in the deep patterns that connect all myths, in the way cultures separated by oceans still dreamed of the same truths. Maybe the real task is not to search for Atlantis, or to dig for golden relics, but to awaken to the wisdom that has always been around us. Disguised in story and stone, the ancients were not only telling us about their lives, they were telling us about ourselves, about the eternal truths that bind humanity together. The question is, will we remember? Asterisk, when we think of science, we often imagine laboratories, telescopes, and equations scribbled on chalkboards. But what if science, in its earliest form, was hidden inside temples, myths, and rituals? What if the ancients practiced a sacred science, one that blended observation of the natural world with spiritual understanding? Take astronomy. Ancient civilizations were obsessed with the stars, but not for mere curiosity. To them, the heavens were a living book, filled with messages. The Mayans tracked the cycles of Venus with such precision that modern astronomers were stunned by their accuracy. To the Egyptians, the rising of Sirius signaled the flooding of the Nile, an event that determined the survival of their civilization. The builders of Stonehenge aligned their massive stones to mark the solstices, turning the monument into a cosmic clock. These were not random alignments. They were evidence of a worldview in which humanity's destiny was woven together with the stars. Medicine, too, carried this sacred dimension. In India, Ayurveda emerged thousands of years ago, teaching that health was not just about the body, but about balance between elements, between mind and spirit. In China, traditional medicine centered on qi, the life force energy flowing through meridians. Acupuncture, herbs, and practices like Tai Chi were designed to harmonize this flow. Even the Greeks, inheriting wisdom from Egypt and Babylon, saw health as a matter of balance between humors, energies that mirrored the elements of the cosmos. These systems were not primitive. They reflected a deep recognition that the human body is not separate from nature, but a microcosm of the universe. And then there is architecture. Walk into an ancient temple, and you may feel something stir, in a sense of awe, of mystery, of alignment. This is no accident. The ancients built with intention. They believed that geometry itself was sacred, a reflection of cosmic order. The golden ratio. The Fibonacci sequence patterns we now associate with mathematics and biology were encoded into pyramids, temples, and cathedrals. These shapes resonated with the human mind, creating harmony not only for the eye, but for the soul. It is as if architecture was not simply about shelter, but about transformation, about creating spaces that tuned human beings to higher states of awareness. Even sound carried this hidden science. In ancient Greece, Pythagoras taught that music was more than entertainment. He believed that harmony reflected the structure of the cosmos, and that certain tones could heal the body and uplift the spirit. In India, mantras were repeated not just as prayers, but as vibrational tools, shaping consciousness itself. The Aboriginal peoples of Australia used songlines, sacred songs that mapped the land, guiding travelers and connecting them to the stories of creation. Today, scientists speak of the effects of sound frequencies on the brain, how music can alter mood, memory, even physical health. Could it be that what we call discoveries are rediscoveries of truths long known? But perhaps the most mysterious aspect of ancient science lies in their understanding of energy. Across cultures, there are whispers of a force that animates all life. The Chinese called it qi, the Indians prana, the Egyptians ka, the Polynesians mana. Though the names differ, the idea is the same. Life is not merely mechanical, but infused with energy, subtle and unseen, yet essential. Modern science cannot fully explain this force, but research into bioelectricity and the electromagnetic fields of the body hints that there may be more to life than chemistry alone. Could it be that ancient healers were tapping into this field, manipulating energies we can barely measure today? What's striking is not only that these civilizations carried such knowledge, but that they preserved it in ways we can still access. A temple's alignment, a chant repeated for centuries, a myth about a serpent or a tree, these were not just cultural ornaments. They were teaching tools designed to pass wisdom forward through time. When you decode the symbols, when you look beneath the surface, you begin to see the outlines of a universal science, one that viewed life as whole, interconnected, and sacred. Contrast this with the modern world. We have divided science from spirit, facts from meaning, the body from the soul. We dissect, categorize, and reduce, forgetting that the ancients may have seen more than we do, not less. Their teachings remind us that knowledge is not simply about controlling nature, but about living in harmony with it. It is about recognizing that the human being is not outside the cosmos, but a reflection of it. And maybe that is the forgotten lesson. Knowledge without wisdom is incomplete. Ancient civilizations may not have had satellites or microchips, but they carried wisdom that could guide us through the challenges of our own time, wisdom about balance, about respect for nature, about the power of harmony. In our age of technology, perhaps the greatest innovation would be to remember what they never forgot. For the ancients, to study the stars was to study the self. To heal the body was to heal the spirit. To build a temple was to create a mirror of the universe. Their science was not separate from their soul, it was an expression of it. And if we could reclaim even a fragment of that vision, we might discover that the forgotten teachings of lost civilizations are not relics, but seeds. Seeds waiting to be planted in the soil of the present, to grow into a wisdom that can guide the future. Imagine for a moment that the wisdom of the ancients was never lost. Imagine if the world had continued to evolve with their vision of balance, harmony, and sacred connection intact. Would our cities look different? Would our relationship with the earth be healthier? Would we, perhaps, feel less lost in a world of endless noise, because we would still be guided by a map of meaning? The truth is, the teachings of lost civilizations are not as far away as we think. They are hidden in plain sight. They live in symbols carved into stone, in the orientation of forgotten temples, in the rhythm of ancient chants. In the myths told around fires thousands of years ago, they're also alive in us in our dreams, in the moments of awe we feel under a starry sky, in the instinct that whispers that life is more than material. But why were these teachings forgotten? History is filled with moments of rupture, natural disasters, wars, colonization, religious suppression, and the rise of materialist thinking. Knowledge that did not fit the worldview of conquerors was dismissed as superstition. Sacred texts were burned, temples dismantled, and oral traditions silenced. What survived often did so in fragments, encoded in myths, or carried forward in secret by those determined to keep the flame alive. And yet, despite all this loss, the wisdom refuses to die. Why? Because it speaks to something fundamental in the human soul. We hunger for meaning. We long for connection. We seek harmony even when the modern world pulls us toward chaos. The ancients knew this, and they left behind blueprints not just for survival, but for thriving. One of the most powerful forgotten lessons is the idea that everything is interconnected. The Mayans saw time as a living cycle, not a straight line. The Egyptians believed the soul traveled through stages of transformation, mirroring the rising and setting of the sun. The Hindus spoke of karma, the law of cause and effect, binding all actions in an intricate web. These teachings remind us that nothing happens in isolation. Every choice, every action, ripples outward, touching the whole. In our era of climate change, global conflict, and disconnection, this is not just spiritual poetry, it is survival wisdom. Another forgotten teaching is that symbols carry power. To the ancients, myths were not fairy tales. They were coded truths. The serpent coiling around a tree, the hero's journey into the underworld. The flood that renews the earth, these were universal symbols pointing to inner realities. Modern psychology has begun to rediscover this truth through the work of Carl Jung and others, who showed that symbols speak directly to the unconscious, shaping our thoughts and behaviors in ways logic alone cannot. The ancients didn't just tell stories, they created maps for navigating the human psyche. And perhaps the most urgent, forgotten teaching is reverence for the earth. Ancient people did not see themselves as separate from nature. They saw rivers as sacred, mountains as the bones of the gods, forests as living temples. To them, cutting down a tree or polluting a river wasn't just a physical act, it was a spiritual violation. Today, as we face environmental collapse, their wisdom feels like a warning echoing across time. Forget your bond with nature, and you forget yourself. But here's the paradox. What was forgotten can be remembered. The teachings of lost civilizations are not gone. They are waiting. Waiting in libraries and ruins, waiting in rituals still practiced by indigenous peoples, waiting in the quiet spaces within our own hearts. When we meditate, when we stand barefoot on the earth, when we gaze at the stars and feel small yet connected, we are tapping into the same truths the ancients lived by. So what do we do with this knowledge? We begin by listening. By studying not just the history of civilizations, but the wisdom behind their choices. By honoring indigenous traditions that still carry ancient teachings instead of dismissing them. By blending modern science with ancient insight rather than seeing them as enemies. Imagine medicine that heals both the body and the soul. Imagine technology guided not just by profit, but by harmony with the earth. Imagine education that teaches not only how to think, but how to live wisely. The forgotten teachings are not just about the past, they are a key to the future. They remind us that progress is not about abandoning old wisdom, but about weaving it into the present. That true knowledge is not measured only in data, but in depth. That the human spirit longs for more than consumption and conquest. It longs for meaning, for connection, for balance. And so, as we stand at a crossroads in history, perhaps the most revolutionary act is to remember. To remember that we are not separate from nature, but part of it. To remember that symbols and stories can guide us more deeply than facts alone. To remember that life is not a random accident, but part of a cosmic design we are only beginning to grasp. The civilizations may be gone, but their wisdom is not. It whispers from the ruins, it echoes in forgotten texts, it stirs in the human soul. And if we listen closely, we may discover that the teachings we call forgotten are in truth the teachings we have been searching for all along. Because the great paradox of lost civilizations is this: they are not lost. They live in us. And by awakening to their wisdom, we awaken to ourselves.